To the casual reader, the Qur'an can appear as a dense compilation of separate moral edicts and spiritual commands. But read carefully, the text presents something much more rigorous, a tightly constructed ontological architecture. This diagram maps 7 interlocking domains: divine nature, reality, moral order, the self, society, cosmology, and causality. Notice how every outer domain links back. An inheritance rule or a shifting galaxy, all are tethered to a single central bedrock axiom. To navigate the text, personal piety, earthly law, and the physical universe must be viewed as components of a single unified chain of moral consequence. We begin at the core. This isolated node represents Tawhid, the absolute singular sovereignty and mercy of the divine, known as Allah. The absolute rule of this domain, and the text's only unforgivable transgression, is to associate any partner or entity with this divine singularity. The text enforces this boundary rigorously. Revered figures from earlier traditions, like Jesus, are explicitly classified as human prophets. They hold immense respect within the narrative, but are stripped entirely of divine status. From this singularity stems absolute omniscience. The divine possesses a complete pre-recorded register of both the seen and unseen universe, tracking the most hidden thoughts and the exact contents of every womb. This sovereign power operates on a massive physical scale. The heavens and the earth are forged in a 6-day creative act, and a fixed, unalterable lifespan is decreed for every living creature. This absolute centralization serves as the necessary foundation for the system's logic. By anchoring all knowledge and decree in a single authority, the text establishes a uniform standard for both the moral and physical laws that follow. Moving outward to Domain 2, this diagram illustrates the Quranic vision of reality. It is two-tiered and structurally imbalanced, divided between the present world below and the hereafter above. The text actively depreciates the lower plane. The present world is framed as a fleeting spectacle, where wealth, power, and the human lifespan are treated as transient, negligible adornments. In sharp contrast, the upper plane, the hereafter, is presented as the only realm possessing real, abiding ontological weight. It is the permanent reality. The pivot connecting these two realms is the Day of Judgment. Here, earthly time compresses, and every soul is gathered for ultimate accounting. Beyond this pivot lies sharply contrasted eternal abodes, the flowing rivers and gardens of paradise, the varying, torment-filled gates of hell, and a liminal, veiled space known as the heights. Because the present world is structurally fleeting, human action only acquires its true weight and meaning when calculated against these eternal consequences. Looking closer, this diagram maps the moral architecture of the present world, the straight path, which organizes the individual and society. For the individual, the primary orientation is absolute submission. The self exists to worship, remain steadfast, and seek refuge in the divine. This individual orientation translates directly into the moral order of Domain 3. Absolute commands carry divine weight. Believers must show extreme kindness to parents in old age, strictly fulfill contracts and oaths, and avoid squandering wealth. Expanding outward to Domain 5, the text rigorously engineers the broader social matrix, starting with the family. It prescribes specific inheritance shares and sets strict rules that legally separate biological parenthood from adoption. Beyond the household, the economic structure demands the redistribution of wealth. A designated portion of resources, including the spoils of war, must be diverted to the vulnerable, to orphans, and to wayfarers. This community is bound by a strict behavioral dichotomy. Internally, believers are mandated to operate with profound solidarity, showing mercy and making peace between those who quarrel. While believers are mandated to show internal mercy, external relations follow a different set of regulations. The text authorizes defensive fighting against persecutors and requires that treaties be strictly honored or formally cast back if broken. The Qur'an treats earthly law and economics as direct physical manifestations of walking the straight path, integrating them fully into the religious framework. In Domain 6, the cosmological scope of the Qur'an articulates that the physical universe follows the same ordered unfolding as the moral law. The text describes a macrocosmic sequence. The heavens and earth originate as a single joined mass before being deliberately rent asunder into a structured expanse. Strikingly, it details a microcosmic parallel. Human embryonic development follows its own sequential stages, from a drop of fluid to a clinging clot, to bone, and finally to flesh. This animation highlights the symmetry between these two scales of creation. The timeline of celestial expansion maps directly onto the microscopic stages of biological growth. By mirroring human biology with the expansion of the heavens, the text asserts that the entirety of physical existence operates under a single, unified blueprint of divine control. All of these domains are driven by the operational engine of the system, Domain 7, causality. Here we encounter the central paradox of the text. If divine sovereignty is absolute, and Allah guides or sends astray whom He wills, how can individual judgment in the hereafter be just? The text resolves this tension by introducing a specific variable. Divine judgment is strictly scaled to an individual being's capacities and the sincerity of their internal striving. This directed graph maps the causal arc. The heart's inward orientation determines whether it receives divine guidance or misguidance. That guidance directly governs an individual's earthly actions, which definitively trigger the eternal outcome, deciding between paradise or hell. This causal loop creates a flawless theological cybernetic system. It is a structure where absolute predestination and strict individual free will perfectly coexist. Returning to our full architectural map, we can now see how the causal engine powers the entire structure, driving momentum from the individual and society directly up into the reality of the hereafter. Because of this tight integration, no single law, action, or cosmic event in the text is arbitrary. A violation like squandering an orphan's wealth breaks the causal chain at a specific earthly point, disrupting the entire system. That localized earthly failure inevitably cascades upward, triggering severe eschatological consequences on the day of judgment. The Qur'an presents a universe where absolute divine power, the physical unfolding of the cosmos, and the precise moral striving of the individual are inextricably woven into a single